Kristy Grant-Hart is amazing. She's the CEO of Spark Compliance Consulting. She was the former chief compliance officer at United International Pictures, and she was based in the UK at that time. She's the author of 3 highly acclaimed books, including the best-selling book, How to Be a Wildly Effective Compliance Officer. She's been featured in the Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, and more, magazines than I can even list in our limited time. But one of the things that you'll notice about Kristy is, besides being an expert in the field of compliance, she also is an inspirational teacher with a gift for actionable steps for executive women. I was skimming through her blog last night. Things like choosing greatness, why you should determine your legacy now, I think strikes a chord with all of us. The top 5 tips for rocking your board presentations is actionable and important for all of us. And today's session, how to powerfully communicate and stop undermining yourself, I think is just invaluable. So I want to thank Ellen, who's one of our board members, for introducing Kristy to us. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Kristy, and thank you.
Perfect. Warning. The following is likely to make you angry. Linda Babcock is a researcher at Carnegie Mellon University, and she was mad that her mother said that she had to ask nicely for things, because in this day and age, women should not have to be asking nicely for everything. So what she did was she devised a study, and in that study, she took 2 women and 2 men, actors. She gave each of them, 1 woman and 1 man, the same speech. This speech was that they were coming out of their employee evaluation, and that one of the 2 groups, 1 man and 1 woman, were both to ask aggressively for a bonus. This was recorded, and after it was recorded, was shown to hiring managers. When men watched the videos, they were willing to hire the male regardless of the request for the bonus, while they were 50% less likely to hire the woman who asked for the bonus. When it came to women hiring managers, they were unlikely to hire the aggressive man. However, they were less than 50% less likely to hire the woman who'd asked for the bonus. So Linda was proven wrong. It does, in fact, require good communication to get what it is that we want. And it's really not fair, and yet that doesn't actually matter, because what matter is results. And so what we're talking about today is that. How do we communicate effectively to get what it is that we want, need, and deserve? Not what the world wants to give us, but how we can go about getting it for ourselves. So I'm Kristy Grant-Hart. Thank you so much, Diane, for that absolutely lovely introduction. I was in the UK for 9 years. I'm now back in California. I'm a lawyer by background. My specialty is in anti-bribery, anti-slavery, data privacy, and I'm the CEO now at Spark Compliance Consulting, where we do all those types of work and create corporate compliance programs for multinational companies. I'm also a professional speaker and author, and I'm a former law professor as well at Delaware University, Widener School of Law. In terms of executive experience, I've been where all of you are. I was the chief compliance officer at United International Pictures, and that's the joint venture of Paramount Pictures and Universal Pictures in 65 countries. So my board was made up of people in the film industry, and presenting to them in a way that we could get them to understand compliance was always a bit of a challenge. So certainly having the communication piece was critically important in making that work. So let's talk about what we're going to talk about today. So there are 4 different topics I really want to cover. The first one is the internal game. If you haven't got that internal piece correct and you're not coming from a place of true strength, the communication techniques will never work as well for you, because people can see in your microfacial movement exactly what you're really thinking. So getting that part right is pretty critical. But once we've talked about a couple of techniques for doing that effectively, we're going to go into the specific communication techniques, specifically 15 different ways that you can really make yourself heard more. And then we're going to talk about seen more. So communicating strength with your body and how you're using it so that you're not accidentally undermining yourself with what you're saying with your body. And lastly, we're going to talk about the communication that's so important and that this presentation starts with, and that is negotiation, particularly when it comes to things like salaries and job offers. So let's start with the internal game. I think this is the hardest part for a lot of people and certainly women. Now, throughout this entire presentation, we are going to be talking about women, which necessarily means that there will be some stereotyping involved. So if you hear something and think, well, that's not me, it probably isn't. There are lots of things, though, that may be you and that can be universal for people who are trying to find their way to be great communicators. So that's the caveat first, that there are some stereotypes, but those stereotypes come from some realities. And when you're talking about the internal game, for me, one of the most important things I ever learned was the distinction of the idea of locus of control. So, when I was a young lawyer, I worked at a law firm, a big international firm that had 85% male partners. And it felt very difficult there at times. The idea that I would ever be able to get into that group because it felt like it was them versus me or that they had all the control. And when I felt like they have control, that frustrated me. And that's because the locus of control was externalized. So we can have an internalized sense of control or we can have an externalized sense of control. And the danger with an externalized sense of control is that it creates a sensibility of victimization and a sense of helplessness. And I can't do it. And I need others to change in order to make it so that my situation is better. There are absolutely parts of your life and mine that continue to have, I can't change it, someone else is in charge. But what I found in terms of allowing me to be my best self and to communicate more effectively was actually that an internalized sense of a locus of control was critical. Because when I think about the things I can control, right, like my communication style, like the things I say, like the way that I stand or sit or approach people, like the way I prepare, that gives me the sense of agency and a hopefulness in a sense that I can do something. And perhaps most importantly, that I don't need other people to change for me to be my best self or to have opportunities. So the thing itself may not change, but my sense of control, if I allow myself to remember to go back to that internalized place, can be very powerful and has been very powerful for me in saying, right, I'm communicating from a place where I feel like I don't need your validation. I need to speak what I need to say. And that internal game for me has been very helpful. And I think one of the things we're taught as younger women is that that external validation, the boyfriends, the bosses, the dads, is so critical. And what I have come to learn as an executive woman is that actually it's much more Alan Cohen saying, if you know your true worth, you do not need anyone else to confirm it. And understanding worth can be a very challenging thing. And one of the best ways that I have found to do it is to actually take it away from myself. So I want you to think about this exercise. And if we were in person, we would all have pencils and you'd be doing this. So imagine yourself actually doing this exercise because I think it can be really very helpful. And what it's called is the circle exercise. So women frequently say to themselves, who am I to do this thing, right? Right now, Spark Compliance, I've been really interested in getting into the technology field. We've had a traditional consulting model where we do risk assessments and training and things. And in the last 2 years, I have thought, no, I want to be a tech entrepreneur. And so this month we put out our first product. And I swear, I'm embarrassed to say it, but it is so true. Repeatedly in my mind, I heard, who are you, little girl, to put out a tech product? Who do you think you are? And this exercise really helped me to say, who am I not to not do that? Because who else is going to do it, right? Somebody else has great ideas, but they won't be like mine. They won't be done the same way or presented the same way. And that is true for literally every person listening to me right now. And one of the ways that I came to that was doing this exercise. So, one of the things the author suggested was to pick someone who you maybe don't even personally know that's had a big effect on you, and to think about what they've given you and what would happen if they had not had the courage to give that to you. So, I thought about it for a while and I thought, you know what? I'm going to use Bette Midler. That may seem a strange choice. However, Bette Midler has given me lots. So when I started to think about it, I was a musical theater major, and I have a degree from UCLA in theater, film, and television prior to law school. And she was my role model, right? The divine Miss M, just kind of being out there and being fun. But her fun also came with teaching me about things like coming to terms with death in the movie Beaches. My grandmother had died recently at that point, and really working through what that meant. Even things like loving my red hair and my rosy skin. And when you're in film and TV and you're auditioning for things, inspired body confidence that I didn't have to look like all the other girls in the audition room. That was useful, as was singing songs I related to and just making me laugh. Now, Bette Midler grew up in Hawaii and had the courage to move to New York City and sing in the gay bathhouses in the 1970s. Had she not done that, my life would genuinely be less rich. So think about this person I don't even know and what she's given to me. And don't even get me started about how much I love Oprah. But it's kind of amazing when you think what these people have given. And it was really helpful for me to put this in serious context when my father died, because there was literally for me a hole in the universe where this person used to live that was no longer there. And so, if that's true of all of them, then it's definitely true of you. So instead of trying to say I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and people like me, it's much more about what am I already? Who am I important to now? And in the work context, that may very well be, the younger admin people who are around you, the people that you're mentoring, the people you're showing what a great boss looks like, the people that you're re-educating about diversity and inclusion, the people that you are showing your strength to, or who you're teaching things to look at in a different way. I really, really love the Marianne Williamson quote about how your light shines, but you give others permission to shine when you do. So when you're asking the question, who am I to? The better question is, who am I not to? And if you're going to have the courage to be that person, the bright version of yourself that you should be, one of the most powerful things you can do is to take that internal strength and communicate well. So that's why that internal piece is so important, and knowing how important you already are, and that if you were to take that away, that would be a huge loss. So it's your obligation really to share your best self. So we're going to go into some specific techniques now to go ahead and see how we can make our best self shine specifically. So the first thing we're going to do is talk about verbal techniques. So these are specific things that you can do to increase your ability to communicate well. And we're going to talk about 5 communication styles. These are 5 don'ts. And it's funny when you start to see these around you. Once you're aware of them, it's hard to unaware yourself of them. I know that's not a word. The first one is that we need to speak things specifically and strongly. So here's our phrase for the next 5 don'ts. Barbara should lead the team. That's our phrase, right? What we don't want to do is add qualifiers. So this one is, I don't mean to sound stupid, but you've probably already heard of this or thought of this. Somebody else may have already thought this, but I thought I'd bring up that Barbara should lead the team. The qualifiers are so destructive because it shows that insecurity of thought. If you think that Barbara should lead the team, what you should say is Barbara should lead the team. The challenge with qualifiers, particularly the this may be stupid, but, is that once you've said that part of the phrase, all your listener is thinking is deciding whether or not this is stupid and then thinking about the thought. So you really want to make sure you're not qualifying your statements with something that would undermine them before you actually say what you think. So that's the first one. Get rid of all of those qualifiers. Next, apologies. I had a junior lawyer when I was at Universal International Pictures, and every single time she came into my office, she would knock on the door. I would say yes, and she'd come in and say, sorry. Finally, I started saying to her, what are you sorry for? She said, oh, I needed to give this to you. I said, why are you sorry to give that to me? And it became a game at some point. I'm like, please stop apologizing. If you're going to say sorry, have something to be sorry for, or just say what it is that you're here for. because we get this reflexive apology thing, and women do it a lot where sorry, so what you actually mean is, may I interrupt? Or pardon me, is this a good time? Things like that. The reflexive use of the word sorry puts you in a position that verbally is essentially being undermined, or where you're below the person or making supplication to them. So try to use the word apology when you actually mean apologize, or if you mean pardon me or may I interrupt, use that word. I'm sorry essentially says you're apologizing for yourself. So I'm sorry, I was thinking that Barbara should lead the team is not a good way to do it. Once again, Barbara should lead the team. Number 3, rising terminals. So I have been back in California now for 6 months. My family's here. I grew up here before moving to London for almost a decade. And in California, there is a famous thing called rising terminals. And when I was in London, particularly Australians tended to do it a lot as well. And when you finish your sentences with that rising finish, it makes it sound like a question or like you're unsure of what you're saying. So Barbara should lead the team is not a statement so much as a question, or asking others for their opinion, or asking for permission to say it. So be really aware of them. Rising terminals absolutely have their place in conversation, but when they're used as a way of essentially either showing insecurity or, again, being done reflexively because that's how people here speak, that is something you want to know and be aware of, because when you are stating a fact, you want to finish it on a lower vowel. You want to be lower in your tone, right? Barbara should lead the team. Barbara should lead the team. Be aware of that one. Number 4, wordiness. So I have had one of the partners that I worked with really challenged by this. So instead of saying Barbara should lead the team, it would become, so I was thinking about this, and I think that Barbara is really, really good. And if we were to allow her to have an expanded job, that'd be fantastic. So I think that she should lead the team. Wordiness is another thing that happens when people are insecure about what they have to say. So this happens both in email and it happens in conversation. So you want to be aware of this in your email as well. Burying what it is. I wonder if we can get whoever. Thank you for joining us. Can we get you on mute? That'd be fantastic. So wordiness is that another one of those things that happens when you're desperately trying to say what you want to say, but you're not sure what you have to say is valuable. So pare down those emails. If you know that you're a person for whom wordiness is a challenge, look at them and make a choice about whether or not this is a direct enough communication. Not rude, but direct. And the 5th communication style is misuse of the words just and actually. I have nothing against the words just or actually. What happens though is that they are used to once again soften things so that we're not coming across as trying to be too direct. So actually, Barbara should lead the team, or well, I just think that Barbara should lead the team. Just saying, just wanting to. It's really been a challenge for me to stop using just as much as I used to. So instead of saying just calling to maybe follow up, say I'm calling to follow up. Those are different energies. And I think that they take the frame of the conversation and say, this is what I would like to say. This is how I would like to communicate. This is what I think. What do you think? The more clearly I can say Barbara should lead the team, the more I invite other people to also say, I agree with you. Or, I actually think that Joe would be a better choice. So these kind of ways of communicating, avoiding these things, make it easier for people to know what you think so that you can be more effective in how you communicate that. Diane, I think I saw that there was a chat thing. I didn't know if you wanted to interrupt or if there was a question I could answer now.
Actually, people at this point are still just are saying, agreeing with everything you're saying. So
okay, well, all right, I'll let you interrupt me then if we need
Will
to.
do. Thanks so much.
Perfect, okay.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
I'm sorry, I just said I'm sorry. Oftentimes I'll phrase it in, I think Barbara should lead the team, or I'd like to discuss Barbara leading the team. Are those, like, I think I always try to self-correct on that, because if I'm stating it, I'm thinking it, but I don't know, any comments or observations about that?
Yeah, it's absolutely about intention. So if the intention is, I want to open a discussion to have this communication, then that's a perfect thing to say. I'd like to discuss, let's discuss this, versus I'm putting my position out there, which is Barbara should lead the team. And either of those are very much giving your statement of intent without watering it down from a sense of either not wanting to be specific enough or it from a sense of insecurity. So that's perfect. Okay, so let's talk about saying no. So in my life, I am and was a compliance officer. And that job is famously the Department of No, right? Can I no? Right. So one of the things that my first book is about in a lot of detail, which is called How to Be a Wildly Effective Compliance Officer, is about this idea of how to say no more effectively. Because one of the reasons I wrote the book was I realized so many people in that industry, I think more than maybe any other, struggle with this and aren't conscious in a way that, say, someone in marketing or in more of a sales role would be aware of how they're coming across. So in terms of saying no, I think that women get a pretty bad rap for this, and how we communicate can be really important. So the first thing is to use the Band-Aid approach. I had a general counsel that I worked with who would not answer emails until the third or fourth request. And it made people crazy. And I asked her about this once and said, why do you do that? And she said, I'm too busy. And most things resolve themselves. So if they really, really, really need to hear from me, they can ask several times and then I'll get around to it. And it just made people go around her. They just they hated it, right? That compliant thing. Okay, fine. You're not going to give me an answer. I'm going to do it anyway and apologize later. Um, so use the Band-Aid approach. If you know the answer is no, people actually handle certainty so much better than they handle uncertainty. So even if the answer is something that they won't like, they can deal with it if they get that no quickly. If you know the answer is no, say it and allow it to go forward in a different way. I was reading a really interesting book last night called Skip the Line. And one of the writer had been a day trader. And he said that people are always surprised that it isn't good or bad things that necessarily move the stock market dramatically or any one stock. It's uncertainty that will tank it. And it was really powerful to me. I connected those two ideas here going, right. People hate uncertainty. Be the person who gives them that certainty when they need an answer. The second way is look for alternative ways to Oz. And this is, I always think of Dorothy like on the yellow brick road going where she's going. There is a yellow brick road, but there may be other ways to get there, right? So when I am dealing with the business, particularly when I was in house, and one of them came to me, one of the business units, and they wanted to partner with one of our competitors. And the answer was just no. The answer was no. It was going to be an antitrust violation if they'd even started it. But what I was able to say was, okay, well, what's the outcome you're looking for? And the outcome was really a new product they wanted to bring to market. And we figured out a way to do it that would not be an antitrust violation and would bring in a third party and make it totally different. And if the reflex was to just say, no, are you kidding me? This is ridiculous, versus, okay, what do you actually want? So thinking about where do they want to go and can we find a different way will not only make people happier, it'll make them trust you more. Because if you ultimately have to say no, they feel like you at least engaged with them to get there and that you really made an effort to do it. And the third way is to use those as teaching moments. So taking the antitrust violation, I can explain to them and actually help them to understand why colluding with your competition is bad, and how, yes, they have a great mailing list, and yes, we have a great mailing list. And if we both use it, that could be a problem, right? If we share them with each other. But what could we do to create a new product that has a new market? What does that look like? I can teach them why the answer is no. Therefore, going forward, they will know, and they don't even need to come back to me to have the whole Band-Aid thing, right? So teaching and thinking about how you are educating people about the why is really important. Which comes to the why, explaining yourself. So my dad, you saw a picture of him earlier, when I was younger and used to ask question after question after question, at some point would look at me and say, because I'm the father, that's why. And that works just fine with 5-year-olds. Really not very good with senior executives, right? Because I said so, that's why. So one of the things, the peculiarities about people is this idea of explaining yourself, even when it's kind of obvious, which is number 5, using the word because in your answer. There's an absolutely fascinating study that was done at the City University of New York. And it was many years ago. And the researchers wanted to prove that just having a reason was better than having no reason. And what they found was that they did an experiment. They went into the library when they still had the operated copiers. I know most of you on this call will actually know what that is. Sometimes the millennials stare at me. But they will go and they had a researcher go and try to skip the line. And the first researcher's speech was, "I'm so sorry, I only have 5 papers. Can I go ahead of you?" 77% of the time, the answer was yes. The next time they had the researcher run up and say, "Excuse me, can I please cut in front of you because I'm in a very big hurry. I only have 5 pieces of paper." 99% of the time, the answer was yes. And they found that the only difference was because of the word because. There was an answer. Obviously, why is that person in a hurry? They're in a hurry. There was no, my cat is stuck on the roof and will die if I don't get there in 10 minutes. It was just, I'm in a hurry. Somehow understanding the why, explaining yourself, and using the word because can make a huge difference. So think about those things when you need to say no. It can help you be much more powerful in what you're saying so that it's a better outcome for everyone. So let's talk about one other set of specific communication techniques, and this is influencing your business. I love the science of influence. I think it's completely fascinating. It ultimately is, how do we influence people to understand our point of view and also to get what we need or want? It's both sides of that. So when we're looking to influence the business, it's one of the most important things we can possibly do, both for ourselves and also for those we work with. So one of my favorite things is to begin with the end in mind. For if you're going into a meeting, what is it you want to get out of it? Starting your day with intentions can be very powerful. I intend to get this done. I intend to feel positively. I intend to be happy at the end of the night that I've been a good wife, sister, mom, daughter. Setting your end in mind is really important in your business. So if you are going to a board meeting, knowing what the outcome is that you want, and that may be substantial in terms of, I want this $100,000 budget approved for the technology I need. Or it may be, I want to feel that I had a moment of connection with the new CFO, something like that. Don't go into things without a direction. There's this wonderful technique called framing, and it's the author's idea of it is that you're either in someone else's frame or they're in yours. And if you don't choose to say, this is what I want, how am I going to get there? This is what I want the end to look like. You are going along with whatever someone else has chosen to be the frame. Now, it's not always, you don't always have to be in your own frame. You can very comfortably be in others. It's fine. But you want to make sure that when you need things to be in your framework, that you've defined your end and that you think about what that should be so you know that you can work toward that. Your subconscious mind will also help you work toward things you have visualized or determined that you want. And you're getting a whole second level of help to get where you're going. Next is to talk to their motivation. So in acting, which I spent a heck of a lot of time doing in my teens and 20s, the famous line, "What's my motivation?" is actually real. What's my motivation is very real, because everyone goes through life always with some sort of motivation. And that sounds like some kind of crazy psycho talk, except it's not. Your motivation can just be to get through this meeting, or to pet your cat, or you're motivated to go get those amazing Stacy's pita chips that are so delicious. Thinking about what the other person wants can really help you to frame your conversation and your ask. So in the compliance world, one of the things that I am perpetually saying is, what does the business want? And the answer is profits, and they want to do well this quarter, and they want to be respected. but they don't want to be on the cover of the Wall Street Journal for the wrong reasons. They don't want to be lambasted. They don't want major fines. They don't want prosecutions. You have what they want. The compliance officer has what they want. Now help them understand that you're getting them where they want to go. So think about what they want and how you can frame whatever it is that you're requesting so that they know you can help them get what they want. Next, mirroring body language, body positioning, and word choice. So I've been around my 9-year-old niece a lot lately, and she and her friends sometimes do that whole stop copying me, stop copying me, stop copying me thing, right? It's not that. And it's so funny to watch. Go in the post-COVID world, someday, we may be able to go into a bar again or a restaurant. And if you do, such a crazy thing, I love to watch people who are clearly on dates to see whether or not they are starting to mirror, whether they're moving their bodies toward each other, whether their hearts literally are starting to be aligned. And it's so interesting to watch how naturally and unconsciously we do that with people we connect with and like. You can use that to your advantage. It really doesn't have to be so heavy-handed. But one of the best ways to do this that I think isn't talked about enough is word choice. So there's a fantastic book called How to Make Anyone Fall in Love with You that I adore. And it's all research about romantic love. And one of the things that it found was that you should use the same word that the person you're interested in uses, particularly for specific things. Like musicians go to a gig, lawyers go to a firm, some people go to the shop to work, right? Some people go to the office. How do people talk about work, in your business? Use their words. Pay attention to the way things are described. If you're using their vernacular, they feel like you understand them. When you are understood, when they understand you, much more likely to have good conversation. So those little tiny word flubs can make a big difference as to whether people hear you or not, no matter how good your idea is. Fourth is to have a whiskey and stay out late. And if you want to have a Sprite, that's fine. I'm not telling you have to drink alcohol. One of the things that they have found that women, we're so responsible and feel so, particularly executive women and women that have risen to high ranks in business, that the majority of people will go back and write their emails and respond to email and sit there and not go out to the bar or the birthday lunch or the coffee or the whatever it is, or stay out late to bond with people. And it can be much more worthwhile than whatever that email is that you're responding to. So be really conscious of that. That time that is the in-between time can be critical. I was talking to the board at United International Pictures, and in the back of my mind, I knew I'd been having a ton of trouble with this guy in France. And if I put it on the record, it would be in the notes, it would be an action item, it'd be in the audit report. I went to the president of the region during the coffee hour between dinner and after the board meeting and said, I'm really having trouble with this guy. He said, it's done. Don't worry about it. And it was true. I never had a problem after that. So building that frequency, that conversation space is really critical, and you should prioritize it. And last, I love this one, is asking people to do favors for you. This sounds terribly counterintuitive, but Ben Franklin was the first person I know that wrote about it. So in the 1700s, he was in the Pennsylvania state legislature, and he was having nothing but trouble with someone who was opposing him all the time. And he knew that this person had a rare books collection about which he was very proud. So Ben Franklin went to the man and said, "Sir, may I borrow your book?" Well, the man said, "Yes," gave him the book. A week later, Ben Franklin came back, said, "It was marvelous, thank you so much." And Ben Franklin, in his journals, said that the man never was difficult again. And he theorized that was because he'd done him a favor. Now, the thinking behind this has been proven now several times afterward, is that if someone does a favor for you, they must like you. Because why else would they do you a favor? And people don't like to say no. So this is one of those brilliant things. When you ask for a small favor, people are likely to say yes, and that will make them more likely to actually like you. That's one of my favorite techniques. Find something small that you can ask someone to do for you. They'll probably say yes, and that can actually make them like you more. Okay, so that's a lot. Those are the 15 topics we're going with there. The next topic we're going to talk about is communicating strength with your body. So I love this little meme here, this "it was never a dress, it's a cape," right? Like we are those strong people who are walking around with a cape on, not just a skirt. Um, I see this a lot, particularly with younger women, undermining themselves simply in the way that they move or hold themselves. And it delivers messages that, frankly, people can't even tell you why they think that someone is strong or not. And it's partially the way that they hold themselves and the way that they carry themselves. And they're really great techniques when you're conscious of them that you can make sure you're appearing as strong as you are. So, let's start with this. We've got our woman in her cape again. I love her. So specific techniques. The first one is to literally take a seat at the table. Many of you may have read Sheryl Sandberg's fantastic book, Lean In. And she, in that book, talks about how when she was a young intern or young in her jobs, that she noticed all the women would take a seat on the perimeter of the boardroom and not at the table, where most of the men took their seat. And she realized that this idea of a seat at the table requires us, from our internalized point of control, right, our internalized locus of control, to say, I am going to take a seat at the table, and not trying to be polite and let everyone else have one first. It's important to show up and say, I am consciously going to do this. And that was really hard for me in the beginning. I always felt like I wanted to make sure everyone else was happy and it's okay. And if there's space, then maybe I will. Know your worth, know you're there for a reason. You wouldn't have been invited if you weren't supposed to be there. And even if you were kind of accidentally invited, act like you belong there anyway, right? Take a seat at the table. And similar to this is don't be afraid to take up space. So I'm talking about like being at one of those big round tables or the big tables where you do these meetings, or will do these meetings again soon. The rule, take your elbows, put them on the table. That's the space that you have. Not this, not this, not this, this, okay? So what you want to do is make sure that the space in front of you, you are squared to it. You have this space. Your things are on this space. Your computer is in this space. Watch the men around you. They take up space. Women are taught, including with the size of our bodies, God forbid we get big, we're supposed to be little, right? And this taking up space, using your hands and saying, I'm taking up this space, is a very powerful way of saying, I belong here physically. Next, position yourself near the leader. We tend to put ourselves in the back. I started long ago challenging myself in basically every room I go into to sit at the front. Obviously, if there's like signs that say, this is Andrew's seat, Kristy, why are you in Andrew's seat? Like, we're not doing that. But if you're even at like presentations, you will always see me in row 1 because it makes me pay attention more, but it also says I'm important, right? I'm here because I'm important. I'm here to pay attention. You should be happy I'm here. So don't be afraid to be near the front of the room, literally to position yourself in the front of the room near the leader. It shows your proximity, right? In the courts, like the King Henry VIII type courts, how close you are to the king shows your power. Well, we don't have that specific hierarchical structure anymore, but it still exists in our minds. So position yourself near the leader and don't be afraid of that. Next, I love this one. This is so subversive. There's a technique where if you know that there's a big room, big meeting, important meeting, go early and welcome people in. So when they show up, you are welcome. Oh, hi, it's so good to see you, Rob. Come on in. I'm glad you're here. You are subconsciously saying, this is my room and you are joining it, as opposed to I am joining your room. So this is just one of those like little fun ones. No one will know why you're there earlier. It doesn't matter. Standing up, looking at your phone, and then, oh, hi, so glad to see you. It's just one of those I am in charge of this space kind of things. Now, watching your standing position. So what you want to do here is you want to make sure that you are watching your seated position. Sorry, I'm moving the Zoom thing. Watching your seated position. In your regular life, if you want to sit with your legs crossed, that's great. Or one leg underneath you, that's fine. Don't do it at work, because that is very much little girl body language. Putting your legs underneath your body hunches you over and makes you not powerful. Powerful is sitting up straight. Powerful is taking up space. Hunching over is not. Be aware to not put yourself in a position where you are hunching yourself over. And the way to do that most subconsciously is to sit on your legs or under your legs in your seat. So be aware of that seated position. You need to know how to do it. Feet on the floor. Your ergonomics people will love you even more, and your long-term self will love you for that as well. And lastly, watch your standing position. I see women when you're taught how to do like photo shoots. I told you I did Hollywood a long time. They tell you to like cross your legs and to like look sideways, right? Because that makes you look smaller. We're back to smaller. Stand up and face people. When you're talking in a business meeting, you're meeting people at conferences. Frequently, women tend to do the hip thing, right? Like where your like arm is here and your hips here. Fine for a date, fine with your girlfriends, bad in business. You want to show up with your body squared because you are here to bring them into your space. You are welcoming people to talk to you. Put your feet on the ground and try to make sure that you're looking forward to talking to people. So you're showing them your whole strength. And more importantly, a really important reason to do this is so that they feel like you are present with them. There is nothing like the reciprocity that comes from you actively paying attention to who you're talking to bring that full circle back to you. And the last topic, negotiating like a boss. So one of the major problems that we have when we are dealing with equitable pay is that women tend not to negotiate. And this gets exacerbated over time. So one of the things in all of Babcock's studies, Babcock we started with in the beginning, is that she found that some of the gender disparity issues weren't so much systematic as things that we could control more as women. So if you take a job offer and it is $90,000 and you accept it and there's a 2% annual raise versus if you negotiated your $90,000 up a little bit more than 10% and then you only ever got your 2% annual raise, you're looking at 109,000 from your no negotiation and your 121. Now extrapolate that over 30 years and 2 different job changes. You can see just how huge that becomes, even if it's not intentional. So what we need to do is think about a strategy for negotiation, whether it's in getting a new job or whether it's in other things we want. And there's a fantastic book. I know I talk a lot about books. I read voraciously, called $1,000 a Minute. And it's about negotiating your salary. And it applies this framework to other things too. But what he says is that you should have a floor where you walk away. You need to know what that number is or what that situation is. These are my nons. I'm not doing this if it's less than this. You need to know where you really want to go so you can visualize what you want, right? This is ideal. This is what I want, that or something better. And then you need to know the points that you don't want to negotiate or that you won't negotiate much. Once you've done what I think of as a triangle, right? The bottom, the top, and the non-negotiables, then you get into what can we negotiate. So with your salary, a lot of people just think that one number. Not really though, right? We can talk about salary, sign-on bonuses, end of period increases, stock options, retirement contributions, your non-monetary, titles, vacation time, learning budget, right? Flexible working. So many things we can negotiate. So if I know my floor, my forget it, I'm done, my yes, that or something better, fantastic, and my non-negotiable. So if my sign-on bonus is a non-negotiable, I'm negotiating the heck out of learning budget, vacation time, stock options. Oh my gosh, okay, fine, that's okay. I will give up the gym membership as long as I can, right, get my sign-on bonus. Think about where you can negotiate. So you go in with a framework already knowing what you want to communicate, which is this is my non-negotiable, this is what I really want. And then you can get where it is you're going. So to close, what do we do about these problems? Ultimately, what Babcock found in her research was that we do, in fact, need to ask for what we want, but it simply is in how you do it, which is why these techniques are so important. Not being afraid, but being polite and framing things in the positive. So being positive about how we can contribute, how we're all going to the same place, how it is that giving me this thing I want will make everybody better, the business better, things more positive, right? Not I want that because everyone else is getting it, but because I know that I can contribute even more. And lastly, adopting a cooperative approach. When people feel like you are on everyone's team, not just your own, it makes them much more willing to want to work with you. So the more that we can use these techniques to make us better, feeling our internal sense of strength, remembering our internalized locus of control, communicating in a way where we're not muddying the waters with insecure phrases like qualifiers and apologies, where we're standing on our own 2 feet strongly and knowing what we want to go after it, we can be even more powerful than we are today. Diane.
I think, thank you, Kristy. This is phenomenal. And I think people have been too just caught up in everything you're saying to answer or ask questions. So this would be a great time if anybody wants to speak up one at a time. How does that sound?
I have a quick question. Kristy, thank you so much, because everything you said resonated with me. Some of those things I have put into practice, even though inside I was dying of fear. So what the question that I have is more out of curiosity than anything else is, how have you seen these techniques work across English and non-English language speaking countries and cultures?
That is such a great question. I love that. The first answer is well. I think that generally speaking, most of them work really, really well. So I have trained or done presentations in 65 countries, and certainly do understand that there are some cultural differences, particularly in the sense of like the way that you stand in some cultures being that can be seen as very aggressive if you're too straightforward and too like pushy. So one of the ways you get around that is that mirroring language and body position. So the technique for if you are standing very differently than everyone else, because in American culture or English culture, that's how strength is shown. If you notice particularly men adopting a different position, adopt that different position. Because you're still mirroring them. And the whole point of communication is to make people feel like you understand them and they understand you, right? That's what you're going for. So it isn't that any of it is rock solid. What it is that you need to be conscious of doing that. In my company, I'm the CEO, I'm the head of sales, just full stop. That's what you do when you're CEO. And I grew up in California and New York, and I talk really fast as just a natural position. I tried so hard not to talk too fast today. When I speak, I had to like work on it like you wouldn't believe. And so I found that I tend to talk too fast when I'm on my first sales calls, and I'm consciously hearing, are they speaking slowly? Are they following me? Consciously bringing down that volume, bringing down my pace. And I forget sometimes. And I've been told like, hold on. And I'm like, oh God, I'm doing it again. So I think that the best thing to do is to be conscious of your physicality and your speech and your how you are interacting in an international environment, and that will allow you to adapt without having to know every nuance of what is specifically the best practice in Japan.
Thank you.
I see a hand up with
It's Donna.
Donna. Sorry, it says D. DeBrill, so I guessed it was probably not the DeBrill. Go ahead.
Use the word polite.
Yes.
Tell me what that means to you, and how, it seems to me it's a very slippery slope from, being polite to wanting to be likable, and there you fall into the trap again.
Yeah. So I looked really carefully at that intern study to exactly what you mean. That word polite can be very triggering, right? The little lady, be polite. I think that ultimately what it comes down to is that sense of internal confidence. The sentiment from the script was that it was an aggressive request for the bonus, as opposed to coming from a place of, I know that I'm good, I know what I can add, and this is why I should get it. I think that the sense of, when I think of polite, I think of it obviously as not yelling and not being rude. But I think of it more as being, I'm not cowed, I don't need your validation for this, but I'm also not going to aggressively overstate that. I guess that would be where I would consider that word polite to fall, is confident without being aggressive or needy in that validation. It's just being calm in who I am. And that would naturally be polite because it's not needing to dominate anybody else.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hello, Amira.
Mhm.
She's raising her hand. I love Zoom.
Hi, can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Hi.
Hi.
That was amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I really could relate to a lot of the stuff you said in the examples because I come from banking, trading ground, compliance.
You are brave. Good. Yes.
And what the question I have is a lot of what you said basically relates to being in a masculine energy. Over the past year during COVID, I've taken a lot of interest in masculine and feminine energy because I transitioned from being super feminine to being like super masculine. And now I'm trying to balance things out. So my question to you is, how do you strike that balance between being in your masculine energy at work, where you take up space, where you have to project yourself as an equal to your colleagues so that you're seen and heard, and being in your natural sort of feminine energy at home with your loved ones? So how do you strike that balance?
I love that. I think that one of the things COVID, but also in the last 10 years at least, is that whole bring your whole self to work sentiment, is that I think that there is less shame about your feminine energy, hopefully in many environments, that it's not something to be negatively associated. For me, I think that it does come down to that sense of confidence, that it's not necessary. When we start, a lot of times we're acting as if and like kind of playing the game of being a confident person, but that the techniques, particularly the body related ones, can help you to actually internalize the confidence that you are creating in yourself. And confidence is neither masculine nor feminine. Confidence is knowing who you are and what you have to say. So I think that it's simply allowing variations of yourself out. I think that you can have your feminine at work, particularly when it comes to creativity. I mean, that, when you're, whether it's creating a report or slides or a new idea or marketing campaigns, whatever that is, allowing that creativity, which is associated with femininity, to be there, while also the masculine energy of let me tell you why it's great. Those things can coexist beautifully and not have to conflict.
Right. Thank you.
Yeah. I think Julissa, is that how you say that?
Julissa, hi.
Julissa, nice to meet you, Julissa.
Hi. First, thank you. That was a great presentation. I just do have a question regarding the favors section that you mentioned. So would you say that like delegating would be the same, or like would you use the same techniques? Because I do, like I think of favors, like I do ask for those, but like I'm just wondering if it's the same, like if you were delegating, would you use the same like kind of strategy when it comes to that?
I mean, it depends. I think that the favors question is really an equal or superior kind of technique. In terms of delegating to people who are either your subordinates, or it depends on if you're asking somebody that is you're in charge of, then no, it's not the same energy. I think that becomes an energy of appreciation and expectation, appreciating what they do well and expecting them to do it well. Those two energies are quite different in that respect. But the actual favors, that tends to be people who are at your level or higher, so that you're getting that reciprocity. It's one of the social constructs of creating the opportunity to have them expect you to do something for them too. And that actually is a bonding feature in social animals, which we are.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is Tara. I was looking at your techniques, and they all resonated with me. This has been extraordinarily relevant and helpful, so thank you. One thing that a former partner of mine, I do legal compliance work too, and so getting to know and communicating knows is particularly relevant. But he also made an observation a couple of years ago that I really noticed around me and that I was doing, and this I think goes to a technique, is when you walk into a meeting, very, very frequently the women have their files and their stacks of paper and I did it too, right? It's like, I got everything right here. The men walk in, they've got, their iPad, maybe a blank sheet of paper, right? And it shows this command, like, I don't need all of this. And I realized that I was often, very frequently doing that just as a crux, just to make sure I've got everything there. And she pointed it out on notice when women walk into a room, by and large, they do that, and all the men walk in and they've got like their iPad and that's it. And so I thought that I've started to try to adopt more of that technique myself. And I think that also gets to your level of seniority, authority. I mean, there are a lot of considerations, but that was something. And then using more words than you need to communicate something is very prevalent and something that in my role with the associates I work with, in particular, I focus on. Particularly if you have non-English speakers or it's not their first language at the table, you need to be crisp and concise and clear in your communication. Otherwise, they can't follow well, I think that maybe that if I was, and they just can't follow all those circuitous routes to the actual point you're trying to make.
I love both of those things. That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing those. That's brilliant.
So Kristy, this is Meg. I'm gonna jump in here if you don't mind. And first of all, I want to give you a huge thank you for spending time with us here at Quorum today and sharing so much, so many fabulous pieces or nuggets of information. Because I have to say, it was jam-packed full of really great ideas and techniques. And I also have to say, I thought the questions and the sharing of ideas that we had both verbally and in the chat were fantastic. Diane, I'm imagining that we can share a lot of that with the group in terms of a follow-up. I hope that's okay. One of the first questions out of the box, Kristy, was, can we get your slides? Because everybody was like, I'll never remember all these things. I don't know if
I can send them to you.
They're so fabulous. So I know that I'm speaking on behalf of everyone here today. That was just fantastically helpful. Is that even a word? I think I made that up. In terms of just how many points in there you could find yourself. I certainly did. I don't know about everybody else. One of the things that really struck me as well is I spent so many years. There was a moment where you talked about I can't remember how it was stay out late was your word. And there was something really fascinating to me about that. And I translated that for myself around fun, like how do you incorporate a little more fun along with all the seriousness? Because I feel like I personally spent so many years being serious so people would take me seriously. Mm-hmm. That was sort of how I equated the two things. And in fact, I think people liked me more and got more from me and vice versa when I was able to sort of relax into just being me, which can include humor and fun and good times and whatever else, it just became that much bigger and better somehow. So anyway, that really resonated with me. So thank you for all those amazing pieces of information you shared with all of us tonight. At Quorum, we try to never leave a session without thinking about actions we can all take as a group, because we're a very action-oriented organization. And I really thought there were some fantastic things, not only personally, how can we personally up our game, in terms of how we communicate and our exchange, because that's how the world goes around and how we get things done. So, there were some really valuable pieces of information there. But I also felt like so many of us mentor and have big teams of people underneath us and, all that thing. How do we share some of these great learnings as well? First and foremost, maybe you should ask Kristy to come in and do a session for your peeps.
I'm happy to do
just
that.
Just saying. But in addition to that, there were so many great pieces of information that perhaps, one of the actions we would have is what really resonated that we can adjust for ourselves, and what were some of the things that we heard today that would be really valuable for others that we know that that could be useful, and how about challenging ourselves towards that, and getting that done right off the backside of this call, because that's completely doable. So how about that for our action step for today? The other action item is I wanted to tell you that we have unbelievable content coming up. Kristy was one of that pieces of amazing content. And so I do want to invite you to pay attention to the emails that Diane Silverman sends out about all the great sessions coming up, because it's just jam-packed with really interesting information. I did want to draw attention to one in particular, because this is our big annual conference that we're going to do virtually this year, which is on the 3rd and 4th. More details about that event, the How We Rise Together event, will be going out this week, I believe, Diana, early next. And it's a not to miss. It's about 3 hours on one day and 3 hours on the second day. So we break it up a little bit because it's a lot, and it's interchanged with amazing speakers, great interactive sessions, and some connecting moments. So we've really tried to pack it in with all kinds of valuable content and connections. So please get that on your calendar as soon as you see that information. We'd love to have you there. And I have to say, it's just one more round of applause for Kristy. We can't be there in the room to applaud her, but we applaud her nonetheless for sharing so many valuable pieces of information. And so great to see all of you. I miss you. And I look forward to seeing you virtually, and hopefully sometime this year, maybe we might even get together, face to face, which would be an amazing outcome. But I wish you all well, a great rest of your week. Stay healthy. And thank you very much.
Thanks so much. Take care, guys.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.